Okay, today we're going to learn the dark room printing process. Before we talk about the dark room printing itself, I want you to, or at least I want to introduce you to the equipment that we use. This is my light source. It's a Bestler 4.5 projector. And then this is my exposure timer, where I set the number of seconds or minutes I want to expose the film or my paper, and that's set on that. Okay, so let's get started. There are two types of printing processes. One is what we call projection type, where we actually use the black and white negative and project the image onto the photographic paper and expose it, and then we run through the process. So let me show you how exactly that's done. This is a paper, the photographic paper. Actually, I have taken out one, and actually so I cannot use it, but for demonstration purposes. So this is always open in the dark room because they are light sensitive. Of course, this room is lit now so that I can film and all, but when we really want to do the process, this room is completely dark. Okay, we do have safe lights that are red, that are not, they don't damage the film, but today we are doing this just for demonstration purposes, so we have the lights on. So we get the photographic paper out in the dark room, of course, but this is now exposed, and this is a fiber photographic paper, and as you can see, the surface is shiny. That's because we had the silver emulsion coated onto the paper. Okay, now these have silver halides that are extremely light sensitive, and that's coated on the fiber paper. And so what we do, the first thing we do is we keep the fiber paper on the platform, and then this is called a holder. This is a holder for the negative. Okay, so what we do is we take the actual film negative, and we go ahead and open the holder, and we put the negative there, and then we close it. So now we have the film negative in the holder that we're going to be projecting onto the paper. So we insert the holder into the projector, and we close it. Okay, so now you have the negative, and you have the light source, and there's the lens that we use to regulate the amount of light that we want to project onto the paper, just like a camera. In this lens we do have an aperture, and so we use the aperture depending on how much light we want to use, and that can be changed. And also my light source can be either elevated or brought down to enlarge the image onto the paper, depending on how big of an image that we want to create. Now if you want to create this is an 8x10, and if you want to create a 11x14 or a 16x20, obviously the projector has to go up so that the image here is a lot bigger. Okay, so then once we have the paper, Now we want to expose that paper with the negative that we have in the holder. Okay, so let's say, but before we do that, we actually calculate the amount of time, how many seconds that we want to expose the paper in order for it to be exposed right, and that's a completely different process and how to do it. But just for today's purposes, let's say we have calculated that you need 12 seconds exposure in order to make the right the right exposure to the film. So what I do is, once everything is set, and then I hit the exposure here, and what that does is it counts down from 12 to 0, and the light is on. And so, okay, so now the image has been projected onto the silver paper for 12 seconds. And then once we do that, now we take the exposed paper, and just remember, this is all done in the dark. Okay, so now let me walk you through. And the first thing that we do, it goes through a series of chemical processes. The first one is the developer, and it's done for about 2 to 2.5 minutes. Okay, and then once the paper is developed, then we want to stop the process. Otherwise, if we don't stop it, it continues to develop. So we take the paper out, and then we put it in what we call the stopper. And this is usually done for a minute. And what that does is actually stops the chemical process that the developer was doing. And once we stop it, now we have to fix the chemicals, the halides, so that it doesn't continue to develop. So this is the fixer, and it depends. Sometimes some people use it for 5 minutes, some people use it for 10 minutes. Okay, and then after we fix it, then we take it out, and then we put it into the washer, and we usually with just plain tap water, we wash it for about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so that's basically the process, how the projection is done. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about contact printing. What's contact printing? In contact printing, we do not use the projector. Okay, so before I do forget, let's take the folder off from there. Okay, so we actually are not projecting the negative. We are actually, the negative is in contact with the photographic paper. And what does that mean? Let me show you what that means. Now, one of the things that you should remember is, when you do a contact printing, the size of the negative should be the size of the eventual print that you would want to make. Okay, so let me and the negatives could be in different sizes. These are actually digital negatives that I have already printed. Okay, so this is a little bigger than an 8 by 10. Okay, then I have a digital negative that's 11 by 14. So in order to make a print that's 11 by 14, I need a digital negative that's 11 by 14. And so that's very important. And then we will talk about how to make the digital negatives later on. Okay. Okay. Now we can even make small prints. For example, this is like a 4 by 5 negative. So if I just want to make a 4 by 5 print, I just use a 4 by 5 negative. Okay. So now what do I actually mean by contact printing? So once we have this digital negative is printed in the computer, okay, generated in the computer, and this is what you will be doing in the afternoon session, actually printing the picture. So in the projection printing, just like I said, the negative is actually projected onto the paper, but in the contact printing, we use the same photographic paper, but the photographic paper is in actual contact with the photographic paper. Okay, so we actually put the negative on top of the photographic paper. Okay, and once that's done, we use a glass to cover that so that there is good contact with no space between the negative and the photographic paper, because we want the image to be sharp. Okay, so once that's done, then it's the same thing. We calculate the exposure time as to what kind of how much time how much exposure this negative needs in order to make a good print, and that's a completely different workshop. We'll talk about that in the afternoon session. But let's say again, if we have to expose this for 12 seconds again. So here we are not projecting any image, but we're just basically projecting. We're using the light source to go through the negative onto the photographic paper, and then that's how we do it. So now we hit the exposure. So the light is now hitting the negative, and then through the negative, it goes onto the photographic paper, and the photographic paper gets exposed. Okay, so now we have exposed the paper. We take the glass off, and we take the negative on the side here. And then now we have again the same situation. We have a photographic paper that has been exposed, and this will go through the same process of the developer and the stopper and the fixer, and then eventually the wash. So there is no difference as to what happens to this paper after the exposure has happened. The only difference in the projection type is where you actually project the negative, and in the contact printing, the actual negative is in contact with the photographic paper. Okay, and so that's the basic difference. Okay.